Dr. Sears, Dr. Richard Sears, he's a longtime friend of mine. I attended an intense seminar on mindfulness, and this had to be now almost 3 or 4 years ago that I participated in that course. He is a board certified clinical psychologist. He is also a past president of the board of the Cincinnati Academy of Professional Psychology. Dr. Sears runs a private psychology and consulting practice in Ohio. He is the director of the Center for Clinical Mindfulness and Meditation. So he is an expert, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you get on his website and use his resources, and perhaps even invite him to your group or organization. Dr. Sears, he is an annual adjunct full professor for UC psychology. He has so much. He is also a psychologist contractor with the Cincinnati VA Medical Center. He is the author of over a dozen books. One of them is called Mindfulness, Living Through Challenges and Enriching Your Life in This Moment. And I have that book. And Dr. Sears, you have a 2-page bio. So I'm gonna let you come up and get started and share with our group. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Rhonda. Yeah, no, I sound really good on paper, but no, I really appreciate being able to be here. And boy, this is such an important topic. I don't have to tell all of you how important mental health is and how challenging things have been in the last year and a half. Well, they've always been challenging at different levels. It's just a different kind of challenging. So I'm accustomed to doing this talk all day long. So let me give you sort of the overview. I'll bring up my slides here. And it can seem overwhelming when you think about mental health and all the advice people give you, and sometimes it's conflicting advice. And well, there's good news. Somebody's saved us the effort to figure out what are the essential things. They literally had a team go through 55,000 mental health studies to figure out, okay, all these different techniques, all these different theories, what are the actual things that create good mental health and create change in our lives? And the good news is there are only 6 processes. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We can distill all this down to 6 essential processes. And again, the good news is you may be doing this already, but knowing about the science, knowing about the principles can kind of help you refine what you're doing. And anything that's already working probably fits in one of these 6 categories. So it can just be a nice reminder. So I'll give you an overview here. So let's start off with talking about what goes wrong. So hopefully you all can see this small writing. If not, just email me and I can get this to you. And this is out there. But, when we think about what goes wrong, what gets in the way of good mental health, it turns out there are also 6 processes. In fact, that's why the 6 positive processes were developed to counter these 6 processes that get us in trouble. When they tried to figure out what is it that gets people into difficulty with mental health, they look through even the most extreme diagnoses, stress and anxiety and panic attacks and depression, etc. And it turns out there are 6 things that keep us stuck. And what's common across all these difficulties, they define as psychological inflexibility. We might also call that rigidity, or just having trouble adapting. And so this is what makes things difficult. When change is always happening, and obviously going on a lot right now, if we can't adapt, if we can't find a way to be flexible, if we can't find a way to be resilient, then we're going to have difficulty. So these are the 6 things that get us in trouble. So I'll quickly go through this, and then I'll talk about the 6 processes to overcome these throughout the rest of the presentation. And they're in no particular order. And the fact that the reason all these are connected by lines is that all of these interact with each other. But see if you can identify with any of these places where you may have gotten stuck. So the bottom one is attachment to the conceptualized self. What that means is we get so lost in our problems or what we're doing for a living, or some role that we have, we forget we're so much more than that, right? So you think, I have anxiety, I have depression, or there's so much to deal with at work. You forget, okay, yes, all that's true, and I'm a parent, I'm a sibling, I'm a spiritual person. There's so much more to who we are. But when we forget that, when we get lost in just dealing with problems, our sense of self shrinks, and that makes it difficult to be flexible. Cognitive fusion is where we get stuck in our thoughts. And I'm sure we can all relate to this. When your mind's just spinning, you can't stop thinking about something. All these thoughts are causing us stress. It's like getting lost in the thoughts. Kind of like watching a movie, right? One of the reasons we go to the movies is to get lost and taken away for a while. And even though that's not real, makes us laugh or cry or get angry. So likewise, that happens in our minds. We forget these are all just events inside of our minds. So we can learn to step back and just notice these thoughts, relate to them differently. So I'm going to talk about all these 6 processes in more detail. Experiential avoidance is another thing that keeps us stuck. This is where, because I don't like uncomfortable feelings, I avoid doing the things that matter to me. So my life starts to shrink because I don't ever want to feel uncomfortable, versus learning how to relate differently to the feelings that show up that are natural parts of life. The top one is dominance of the conceptualized past and future or limited self-knowledge. Now, this is the opposite of mindfulness. This is where we get so lost in the past and in the future, we stop living in the present moment, which is the only time you're ever going to do anything or feel anything or experience anything. And things get so conceptualized that we lose touch with the sense reality. We lose touch with ourselves and our own reactions. So we'll talk about mindfulness to overcome that. Over on the top right is lack of values, clarity, or contact. This is where we lose touch with what really matters. So the opposite of that is being in touch with what really matters. Why do you get out of bed in the morning? What gives your life meaning? What makes you feel fulfilled? What would be a life worth living to you? Because it's so easy to get lost in just paying the bills and feeding the kids. And, we can forget what's it all for. So we want to be more in touch with that. And the last one is unworkable action. This is where the things we're doing are just not working. And this obviously contributes to being stuck. Sometimes we keep trying harder, and that's not really the right thing to do. We maybe need to change our behavior. And so we have to base our choices of behavior on how it's working for us. If something's not working for you, we got to find a different way to do things. So those are the things that keep us stuck. And here's the opposite. Now I'm going to go into each one of these 6 in detail throughout the rest of the presentation. So let me just touch on this. So the goal in the middle is this psychological flexibility, resilience. I like this word versatile. To be versatile is to be able to be adaptable. And it doesn't mean you lose yourself. You may be very committed to something, but you're flexible in how you get there. So these are the 6 processes that we'll talk about: connecting with a bigger sense of who you are, stepping back from your thoughts, so to speak, and not getting lost in your thoughts, letting go of the battle with ourselves. Again, doesn't mean I like reality or I like my feelings as they are in this moment, but letting go of fighting myself and fighting reality, which is wasted effort. Contact with the present moment, or mindfulness. What's happening right now in front of me? Because this is the only time I can take any action or be flexible and adaptable. Values, as I said, getting in touch with what really matters, and committed action, doing something, taking some small step. So this is a very, very simple process, but you're going to see there's a whole lot contained within these 6 processes, but this is the big picture view of the 6 processes that contribute to mental health, flexibility. So one of the started as a therapy. Now it's considered more of a broad training used in all kinds of corporate environments, just general life kinds of things. So acceptance and commitment training. So this is broad beyond just this particular brand, so to speak, but this is a nice place to start. So if you're interested in learning more about this, you can just search ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. Lots of books, lots of resources out there. And as Rhonda said, there's resources on my website if you want to go there. It's on the last slide. But what this is basically, it's using acceptance and mindfulness processes and commitment and behavior change processes to produce greater psychological flexibility or resilience. So what this means is you can learn to check in with this present moment as it is. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I experiencing right now in this moment? And that could include some stress, some unpleasant emotions, but just noticing things exactly as they are right now. And then asking yourself, what do I want to be doing in this moment? What matters to me? Where is my life going? And is what I'm doing right now moving me in the direction of what matters? Or am I sort of stuck in circles? They sound contradictory, but they're important to go together. Acknowledging reality, acknowledging things as they are, and making a choice in each moment to move toward what matters. So let me get more concrete on what I mean by that. First of all, what do we mean by this psychological flexibility? As I said, being resilient or being versatile. Here's one definition. Contacting the present moment fully as a conscious historical human being. So again, you can't do anything outside the present moment. So when we live in our heads all the time, we're just spinning. We're firing up all kinds of stress and anxiety. So contacting the present moment fully with awareness, consciousness. And I have a history, there's a history to me that made me who I am that I keep in mind. And based on what the situation affords, right? So I have to pay attention to context, changing or persisting in behavior in the service of chosen values. Now that's an important statement. So let me break that down. What this means is if I keep in mind what really matters to me, there are times I need to persist in something and times I need to change my behavior. And I also have to have the wisdom to know the difference, right? So for example, going to college to get your degree, I'm sure there were moments you didn't want to get out of bed. You didn't want to take one more exam. You didn't want to have to write that paper, but it was important to you because you value education. So you made yourself do those things. There were probably also times you had to change your behavior. Something you were doing was causing you to not get as good of grades, or skipping class wasn't helping your grade point average. So you did some things to change your behavior, all in the service of that education that you wanted to get. So, if you're just dealing with the problems, you get lost in the problems. But if you remember, this is what I'm doing all of this for. I value serving others. I value my family, whatever it might be. If you keep that in mind, it's going to be easier to deal with the challenges as they come along. In fact, a really good way to illustrate this is with a metaphor. And interesting to give this one to education professionals here, right? So it's called the bus metaphor. Imagine that your life is a bus, right? You're the one at the wheel and you're driving your bus. All along the way of life, you've been taking on passengers, right? Memories, experiences, thoughts, emotions, etc. Now, some of these passengers on your bus are very pleasant and you like having them around. But some of these passengers on this bus are not so pleasant. There's some bad memories. There's some awful feelings. There's some strong thoughts that are negative. Now, what can happen is because we don't like these negative thoughts and feelings and memories, we try to get rid of them. So you get caught up in this situation where you're like, don't make me pull this bus over, right? And you're yelling back and screaming and trying to control all these passengers, and you keep trying to kick them off your bus because you don't want those things. Well, you can't kick them off because they're your feelings, they're your memories, they're your experiences. And guess what? While you're fighting these passengers, who's driving the bus? It's either going nowhere, or you're going in circles, or you're haphazardly going through life. The other thing that can happen, by the way, is you make some secret deals with these passengers. And maybe the secret deal is, hey, if you guys stay quiet, with anxiety, you stay down, negative thoughts, don't bother me. I'll keep my life small, right? Because maybe you want to spend more time with family, or do something more fulfilling. You start driving your bus that way, anxiety is going to show up. Well, we don't think we can handle this. Negative thoughts will show up. You're not good enough to do this. Okay, well, I don't like those thoughts and feelings, so I'm going to turn back around and keep my life small. So this metaphor is saying, first of all, are you driving your bus, or are these negative thoughts or strong emotions driving your bus? And where do you want to go? So once you decide what's important in your life, can you just start moving in that direction? And instead of fixing all these things first, can you sort of bring them along for the ride? So this is a nice metaphor. Instead of, okay, as soon as I feel better, as soon as I can think positive all the time, as soon as my stress and anxiety go away, then I'll start living my life. Well, the research shows that may not be true, not to mention that may never happen. The research also shows if you just start doing what matters, those things are likely to go down. But even if they don't, at least now you're doing what matters and you're bringing it all with you. So that's the metaphor. Where do you want to go? And don't lose sight of that, and bring all these passengers with you. So let's get in more detail about each of these processes. So self is context. That's a funny way to say it, but this is getting at what I was talking about before, remembering that you're so much more than the problems you're dealing with, or your anxiety or stress, or whatever it might be. I don't know if this is a bumper sticker, but it should be. You are not who you think you are. Sometimes we confuse our thoughts with the sense of who we are. And in fact, we're just so much more than that. If you can think something, you must be bigger than that thought. So the opposite, the one that gets us in trouble, is self as content, where you think, I am my thoughts, I am my feelings, I am my experience, right? I am an anxious person. I'm not good enough. Whatever these things are, you start to identify with these things. Self as context, as I was talking about, is this ability to step back and recognize, okay, I'm having thoughts that I'm not good enough. I'm having feelings of anxiety. I have these different roles in my life that demand my attention. But I'm so much bigger than all of this. I can make room for all these experiences, and, I can still deal with things. But you keep in mind, I'm so much more than all these things. So your sense of identity grows. And when you have a bigger sense of identity, yeah, I've got this problem, but I'm so much more. You're going to be flexible in how you deal with that versus, and we've all been there, right? This problem becomes your identity, and it's, really consuming. It's going to be hard to be flexible and deal with it as effectively. So we use lots of metaphors and ACT because it's about, engaging different parts of the brain than just the chattering thought processes. So another metaphor that we use is called the chessboard metaphor. And it's funny, I bought this chessboard when I was a kid in Mexico, and I finally got a use for it. I took pictures of it so I could illustrate this concept. So on the left side, this is that self is content, or conceptualized self. In other words, how you think of yourself with thoughts. And on that left side picture, if you identify yourself with the pieces, like I'm the black pieces and I've got to win against these white pieces, right? you're going to get really caught up in that drama. You're going to get upset if you lose a piece. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be fighting and trying to get the right strategy. But in this metaphor, you're really much more like the chessboard. So the right side is what we might call this observing self. There's a part of you that notices all the experiences you're having, or the self is context, right? The chessboard is the context in which the game plays out, right? There wouldn't be a chess game at all without the board there. Well, guess what? There wouldn't be any thoughts, positive or negative, without you having those thoughts. So you're much more like the chess board, and you can sort of step back and notice, oh, here are some positive thoughts, here's some negative thoughts. That's interesting, you know. And the less caught up you get in all that drama, the more flexible you're going to be able to be. So this seems a little bit abstract, but I'm sure you can all relate to what I'm talking about. Those times you can step back. Usually it's easier after it's over when you're dealing with something difficult, but you can develop this skill. And I don't mean dissociating or, you know, losing touch. It's the ability to keep in mind context and see the bigger picture of who you really are. So that's self as context. So that's one process we can work on. And by the way, this is another reason why, you know, somebody well-rounded seems so flexible, right? They have much more of an identity. And, you know, we can relate to this where you get a new job, you want to impress people, and this becomes your identity. And not to say it's not important, but if you remember, I'm so much more than all these things, you'll be able to be more flexible. So next, let's get into this process of working with thoughts. I'm guessing all of you are problem solvers. That's what got you into the profession, at least a piece of it. And words and language are very important, but it can also be a trap. So we want to watch for the ways we get stuck in our thinking and how it starts to work against us. Because this is a funny thing, and this may seem, again, a little bit abstract, but when you really get this, it really allows a lot of freedom from all this compulsive thinking that tends to get caught in our head. So bear with me for a little bit with this before I get into a practical application. So think about the fact that we're not born with thoughts or words, right? Here's a picture of my youngest daughter when she was a baby, and she'd probably be embarrassed that I put this picture in here, right? I've just got this empty thought bubble, right? You don't come out talking and thinking. What happens? You hear people around you as a baby talking, and then you start to imitate that talking, and then you internalize that talking. So thinking is just talking to yourself. Now, isn't it funny that we do that all the time, right? Let's see, I want to tell myself something. So I got to think about what it is I want to tell myself. And then I got to put it into words. And then I got to tell myself these words. And then I got to remember what these words mean. So I'll know what it is that I wanted to tell myself. Okay, we spend a lot of time doing that. And what's even funnier is when we argue with ourselves as if there's somebody else inside our heads that we have to win against. You better do a good job. Oh, I don't really care. Well, you say that now, but you're going to not like it if you do a bad job. Well, they can just, and you spend all this time arguing as if there's another person in there. And then what can happen is we forget that all of that stuff is just a sound. It's not even a physical reality. It's a representation. In fact, this is, again, what gets us in trouble. We confuse words and thoughts with what they represent. Right? So bear with me a little bit because this is important. You know, the word water is not the same as this. You know, now that's a convenient thing. I can say, do you have any water? I'm thirsty. And then I get this, right? But as obvious as it sounds, the word, the sound, water is not the same as the substance here. So what can start to happen is we have a thought, things are never going to get better. I'm so overwhelmed. What's wrong with me? Whatever it might be. And we forget that's all sound. It doesn't mean anything except what our brain has attached to it. It's not a physical reality we can touch. So I don't have to even fight with it or fix it or argue back. It's just a sound. One of the ways we can get at this to demonstrate this principle is to show you how we attach emotions and associations and memories to these sounds. For example, if right now I had a magical way to reach through the screen and give you a lemon. So I got a picture here. You can imagine this, right? Let's imagine that I gave you all a big, overripe, juicy lemon, and I ask you to start slicing that lemon with a knife, and it's so overripe, some of it even sprays into your face a little bit. Maybe it stings your eyes, and this thing's sort of dripping all over your hand. And so you take this lemon, and I want you to take a gigantic bite of this lemon. Are any of you noticing a little change, maybe a little tightening, or something going on in your mouth? So there is no lemon there. You know, here's this electron representation on your screen, but there is no real lemon here. But your mind creates this memory, this thought, this ability to taste it, even though it's not even physically present. And so this is what our minds can do. They bring up things that aren't here, and they create all kinds of realities and emotions. And then we forget we're the ones that are doing that it's just a word, it's just a sound. So you can do this with any word, but since we just use lemon, let's do that. Watch what happens when I say this word over and over and over again. In fact, this works even better if you say it with me. You know, you got to make sure there aren't people watching you or walking by. This is going to be really weird. But if I say this word over and over again, watch what happens. Lemon, 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 lemon. So what did you notice about that? Well, for most people, it just starts to become a sound again, right? Almost like, you know, and it doesn't have any meaning anymore. It's just a sound. But we can forget this is all these thoughts ever were. The thoughts about what's going to happen at work tomorrow, the thoughts of, am I good enough? The thoughts of, will this ever get better? Not to invalidate the importance of some of those thoughts, but we forget they're just thoughts. They only exist in our mind. So you don't have to fight them or fix them. You don't have to get lost in those things. They're sounds. And so this is a very subtle but very profound realization if you can get to this point. So one of the things you can learn to do, again, is to relate differently to those things. As I started talking about earlier, a lot of times we're taught to fight our thoughts or try to outthink a negative thought. And there have been approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy where you try to give more rational thoughts to your irrational thoughts. And that works sometimes. But when we're really caught up in them, that can make it worse, right? The more you argue inside your own head, the more it just kind of goes on and on and on. You ever had that experience where you're trying to talk yourself out, especially when it gets to the point of anxiety or depression, right? Come on, think positive. It'll be a good day. Well, that's what you thought yesterday, and it was a horrible day. Well, today's going to be different. You thought it was going to be different yesterday and the last 747 days, and it's still horrible. You know, you can end up just fighting in your head. So this process, and basically, it's like you get fused to these thoughts as if they're real, as if you're lost in that movie and you forget it's a movie. Diffusion is the ability to step back, also called decentering, because instead of being in the center, I want to sort of decenter from them or get some distance from your thought. To be able to recognize, to be able to notice, wow, look at that. I'm arguing with myself as to whether or not it's going to be a good day. That probably means I'm stressed out. You don't have to spend hours fighting and arguing with yourself. It's a funny thing. It's a funny habit that we tend to get caught up in. So one of the reasons therapy or talking to a friend or journaling is helpful is you're getting those thoughts outside of your head and getting some distance, getting some perspective on them and remembering, okay, this stuff is existing in my head. Now it might represent reality, and maybe these thoughts are useful sometimes, but first and foremost, remember these are thoughts and then consciously choose how you want to deal with them. So I already talked about that movie theater analogy. You can just practice noticing, oh, I'm thinking about this. Is this something I want to think about? Maybe it's just old stuff spinning. And you just notice it. And in fact, these thoughts may not even stop or go away, but you can just practice noticing that they're there instead of getting lost in them. And in fact, just to continue with that movie theater analogy, right? You ever been in the movie theater with somebody who argues with the movie? Don't do that. What are you thinking? That's ridiculous, right? It's useless. It gets everybody upset. It doesn't change the movie. Likewise, there are times our thoughts, this may not be what you want to hear, but it's what the research shows. You can't just stop your thoughts, right? You can't make your thoughts different. You can a little bit, and then it pops up again later on. So what they found, much better than trying to stop your thought or change your thought, is change your relationship to your thoughts. So it's this ability to step back and just notice, oh, that movie's playing again. Now I'll get sucked into the movie and, got sucked into the movie again. What's right here in front of me? Who do I want to spend my time with? What do I want to do in this moment? And the thoughts may even still be there. They may still float around in your head, but you don't have to indulge or spend all your time arguing with them. It's like, when people come to me, how do I fix all these negative thoughts? It's like they got these negative thoughts. So they want a positive thought, negative thought, positive. And they hope I'm going to help them pull harder against all these negative thoughts. And I basically whisper in their ear, both of those thoughts are yours. There's this weird feeling of cheating, like I should have had to work harder against these negative thoughts, but you don't have to fight with these things. So this is a really big shift for somebody. And I work with people all the time who tell me, oh my gosh, I have wasted so much of my life in my head. And it's just opening up so many more things I can do in my life. And of course, it doesn't make everything better immediately. It doesn't mean, you still don't have to fix problems, but you can get out of that stuckness by taking your thoughts too seriously. So another process that helps us be more mentally healthy, resilient, flexible is acceptance. Now, this is one of those terms that's thrown around sometimes, and it can be misunderstood. Here, what we're really talking about is acceptance of reality in this moment right now. So it doesn't mean you have to like it. It could be a tragedy that's happening. It could be a very stressful situation. But here's the thing, if you don't accept the reality of what's happening, how are you possibly going to deal with it? And think about the most flexible, mentally healthy people you know. They're ones that can say, oh, this is awful. I can't believe this is happening. And what do we want to do right now? Versus somebody that, I know lots of people, and it's normal to have the thoughts. I have the thoughts sometimes, but I know lots of people that for a year and a half, this is horrible. I can't stand this. I don't want this to be true anymore. And all they're doing is getting anxious and stressed out and flustered. Now, part of acceptance is also accepting your own emotions, accepting I feel stressed right now because this is a difficult time. I am anxious right now because of all the things I'm going through. So you can learn to have those emotions and not fight with them. And this is a funny thing. I'm not saying you like anxiety or be good to them, but you can stop fighting yourself. Because what happens, a lot of times we get anxious about our anxiety. We get stressed about our stress. We get depressed about our depression. We hurt from our pain, right? So as funny as it sounds, you can just learn to be kinder to these emotions. If you had a friend that was suffering, I hope most of you wouldn't scream at them and say, stop it. You would give them some compassion for what they're going through. And so we can learn to do that for ourselves and just notice, okay, in this moment, I'm feeling anxiety. And what do I want to do in this moment? I don't have to fight my own feelings. We try to often fix our emotions as if it was a problem that we have to get rid of. We aren't taught that emotions are what give life richness. In fact, this is fascinating. There's research that shows if you have trouble feeling difficult emotions like stress and sadness, you also are likely to have difficulty feeling positive emotions like joy. There's something about the brain that doesn't want to feel negative emotions. It also shuts down our capacity. So when we embrace the richness of all these emotions, and I'm not saying, wallow in it or get lost in it, but when we allow all these emotions to flow, there's a richness that comes into our lives, an ability to feel more compassion for other people, to feel more joy, to feel more appreciation. And, another way of looking at this, I like this analogy. Are you approaching life as if it were a math problem or as if it were a sunset? There are times we need to solve problems, so that thinking comes in handy to solve external problems. But when you approach your own emotions like a math problem, you get really caught up in fighting it. When you approach your relationships like a math problem, now, there are problems you have to deal with in relationships, but really, it's more like a sunset, something to be appreciated, not overanalyzed in your mind, something to be experienced. So we can learn to do this with our own emotions as well. Again, a couple more metaphors to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about here. One is a quicksand metaphor, and I apologize for this picture. I couldn't find a human being in quicksand. I only found a cat, but it was obviously manufactured in Photoshop or something. I once got a nasty email because somebody said, I love cats and you shouldn't have done that to a cat. Oh, no, it was just Photoshopped. Anyway, they say if you fall into quicksand, the worst thing you can do is struggle and squirm and try to stand up, because it'll just suck you in all the more. As contradictory as it sounds, the best thing to do if you fall in quicksand is to lay flat, spread out your body surface area, and try to float and sort of swim across it a little bit. So likewise, we can end up fighting our feelings. I'm fighting the stress. I'm fighting this anxiety. And that just prolongs the struggle and makes it worse. So as odd as it sounds, you can just sort of open up and say, well, this is what I'm experiencing right now. I don't have to like it, but I can at least let go of the struggle with myself. Another metaphor is to imagine you're holding a crying baby. All right, if you've got a baby that's screaming and crying, assuming it's not hurt or pinched diaper or something, the best thing you can do with a crying baby is just hold the baby, right? The worst thing you can do is scream, shut up, stop crying. You have no reason to cry. And, and try to bargain or argue or logically, you just hold the baby and allow the feelings to come and go. And we can learn to do that with ourselves instead of fighting. Now, of course, we have to be professional, so you just kind of fake it sometimes. But if you go through your whole life trying to fake it and holding everything in, that's when it tends to feel overwhelming. It's allowing it to flow that's most healthy and keeps you flexible. All right, so this is the fourth process, and they're in no particular order. Mindfulness, or contacting the present moment. So this is so important because, again, as I said before, we can create so many realities in our minds that don't even exist in physical reality. And sometimes that's useful. It's good to think through what if when you're a problem solver, but we can accidentally start living there. So we can practice coming back to right now in this moment. So here's one of my favorite definitions of mindfulness by Jon Kabat-Zinn, and anything he's written or YouTube talks, really great stuff. He's been doing mindfulness for decades and decades. So he defines this as the awareness that emerges. Let me just break this down line by line. Awareness that emerges is this waking up quality. because a lot of us go through life in sort of a half sleepwalking state. Even during this presentation, I bet a lot of you have gone off somewhere else in your mind or thinking about, well, I should have breakfast before we started, or how long is this going to last? Or I got a whole lot of things to do this afternoon. I wonder suddenly you realize, oh, I'm in a presentation right now. You sort of emerge into what you're doing in this moment. So, there are times, again, we need to think and plan, but what happens is we miss out on our life as it's unfolding. So we can just practice a little more often. What am I experiencing right now? And I can pay attention to my habits. Is what I'm doing right now something I'm doing on purpose? So paying attention is a big part of mindfulness. And this particular way has to do with the attitude. So as I just said, on purpose. Am I doing what I'm doing right now on purpose, or did I fall into some automatic habit? Now, sometimes it's okay to do an automatic habit, but if you live your life on automatic pilot, it's not going to feel very rich. You're going to feel like you're missing out on things, or you might automatically do some things that are not helpful. In the present moment is the next part of the definition, because as I said, that's the only time you can pay attention or experience anything. So this ability to drop into right now. Non-judgmentally doesn't mean judgments are bad, but when you constantly judge everything, you're comparing it to something else. Again, sometimes that's useful, but can I set aside judgments sometimes and just fully experience what's right in front of me? The last part's to the unfolding of experience moment to moment. So this doesn't mean you're just sitting still. That's okay. You can practice sitting still. But can I be engaged when I'm talking with somebody, when I'm playing with my kids, when I'm driving my car? Can I be present in what I'm doing, at least more often? Because so many of us, as I was saying, live in the past or live for the future, and we miss out on the present as it's happening. So one of the best ways to experience mindfulness is just to notice your senses. So I was going to do a formal exercise, but we're running out of time. Running out of time, even though there's only this moment. But I invite you, if you do want some exercises, there are lots of them out there, and there are some on my website, and I especially recommend the 3-minute breathing space. It's just a short one. But literally, just right now, if I ask you, what do you feel in your body? What do you see in front of you or around you? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? That's being mindful, because you can only experience your senses in the present moment, right? Everything else is a thought or a memory. And if you can practice being more present, you can actually get a lot of work done, believe it or not, but not feel busy. Because think about this. The feeling of busyness only comes when you're thinking about what you're not doing, right? Feeling of busyness only comes when you're thinking about what you're not doing, right? So if right now you're thinking of 200 things you have to do later, you're going to feel busy. But the reality is you're just listening to me right now. Doesn't matter if you're going to do something later or not. In this moment, this is just what you're doing. So we can practice just doing what's right in front of me. Now, of course, you can triage what's most important. You can keep your to-do list. But if you're trying to hold all that stuff in your head all day, you're going to feel really busy. Now, values is another important principle. And as I mentioned, this is what gives our life meaning or purpose or fulfillment. And it's a direction for your life. You never arrive there, right? If family is a value, then that guides your decisions. But you never can say, I've accomplished family, I'm done, I'm going to check that box, right? If family is important to you, that's a lifelong kind of a value. And values are things that you just really care about, and you probably can't even put it into words why. You feel pulled to do it. If you feel pushed, like, yeah, I guess I should spend time with family, that's okay. Maybe family's just not really that important to you, or maybe there are other things. And certainly you can have more than one value. But these are the things that as I said, get us out of bed in the morning, the things you want to do, the things that pull you. And so they're not specific things. So getting a college degree is not a value, it's a goal, but it could point to a value of learning. Maybe you just love learning, or maybe it's a step on the way of being of service to others, and that's something you value. So you want to get in touch with this. Now, the very difficult thing a lot of people have is they forget. They don't know what's important. Because it's so easy, as I said, to get caught up in our daily problems, that we forget why we're doing any of it. So it's sad to me how often I say, well, what would make your life worth living? Or what is fulfillment to you? Or what would be a good life by your definition? Some people just dry up. They don't even know what that would be. So you may have to, other people may know right away, but you may need to spend some time with this. If this is not clear for you, spend some time and really work on this, and watch out for just some glib answer. Just kind of get a feel. What is it that really matters to you? Now, again, when your mind is always thinking about problems, it's going to be hard to think about what matters and what makes you feel good. So you may have to get into this more like a brainstorming thing, just to open up those more creative parts of your mind. So, one thing you can ask is, what did I used to want to be when I grew up? Doesn't mean that's what you have to be, but it can spark some of that creative thinking again of what was important to you. Funeral exercise, don't do this if you're depressed, but if you could imagine going to the end of a long life, whatever that means to you, what would be a life worth living when you look back? Not in terms of accomplishment or what people would say about you necessarily, in terms of money or whatever, but what would you want your life to be about? What would have been a life well lived? You can think about it that way. Magic wand exercise just means if you didn't have to worry about how it would happen, you didn't have to worry about obstacles that are in your life right now, what would your life be like? What would you want to do with your time? Who would you want to spend your time with? Another way to get at this is through the Valued Living Questionnaire. And this is free, I believe. If you just Google that Valued Living Questionnaire, you can look up these questions. And it's just meant to just kind of exercise your ability to look through it and think this through. But there are 10 general domains of values. Now, this isn't all there is, but it's a good way of categorizing a lot of the different types. Because again, we don't want to confuse a value with just a specific goal. Now, what's interesting to me is the first 4 out of the 10 have to do with relationships. These are all very important to us, no matter who we are and what we do in life. Now, it's important to different degrees to different people, but, family, intimate relationships, parenting, social life. Number 5 is career or employment. You remember when you actually wanted a career because it mattered and then it turned into a job? Well, hopefully you can get back in touch with why you're doing the work that you're doing, and see that the value is there, if you don't get too caught up in all the difficulties that go along with it. 6, you're all doing right now, education and personal growth. For some people, this just makes them feel alive to learn new things. 7, recreation, fun, leisure. Again, it's very sad to me when I ask people, what do you do for fun? And they just kind of stare at me and say, fun? What do you mean? I wake up, feed the kids, go to work, come home, feed the kids, go to bed. That's my life. Okay, well, is that the life you want to have? Or is there a way of putting some of this in there and rediscovering some things for yourself? Spirituality, and very broadly defined, what gives your life a sense of purpose or meaning. 9 is citizenship, or having to do with the environment or community, belonging to something bigger. And 10 is health or physical well-being. A lot of the stuff we'll be talking about here with MESSA. So just some thoughts to get your mind working on things that might be important. So spend some time on that, because again, if you have a big enough why, you're willing to do difficult things. Not that you want to, but that why really helps you get through difficult things and reminds you why you're going through things. And it's a big contributor to mental health. So the last of the 6 is committed action. And here's where the rubber meets the road, because we can talk about this stuff all day. You can understand all this stuff intellectually. But the only way this manifests is through some kind of physical action in the real world. So when we say committed, we don't mean commit yourself to somebody else or, make a promise or whatever. It's really making a commitment to yourself to do something concrete in the real world. You can't do sort of half an action, right? A step, you either commit to taking a step or you don't take a step. There's one or the other, right? Now, it could be a teeny tiny step or it could be a giant leap. But that's what we mean by committed action. Do something that moves you in the direction of what's important. So if family's important to you, my question would be, okay, well, what's one thing you can do today to bring you closer to family? I got up this morning and there was a little note in the kitchen that said, good luck on your presentation. That's just touches my heart. These little things that we can do to express or manifest or move toward these things that are important to us. Now, we have to be careful. Sometimes people will say, well, I'll try, and this is a funny thing. We have to watch out for that, because you either do something or you don't do something. Right? That's a Yoda expression, right? Do or do not. There is no try, right? If I try to pick up this pencil, what does that mean? I'm just straining myself, right? Either I pick it up or I don't pick it up. So the question is, what is something you're willing to do each day? As I said, it could be a very tiny step, hug your kids or look up something on the internet about what you're interested in, but take some small action every day, and that creates some momentum. I mean, how many times have you all told yourselves, well, as soon as everything settles down, as soon as I feel better, as soon as this happens or that happens, then I'll get around to doing something, and it just never happens, right? Or your steps are so big that you have to wait forever to get ready for it. See if there are ways you can take tiny, tiny steps every single day that relates to something important to you. So if spirituality is important to you, can you read something uplifting for 5 minutes before you go to bed? I mean, it could be that small, but now you're doing something, you're manifesting what matters to you, and that contributes to your mental health instead of feeling stuck. Now, here's the hard question. Are you willing to have uncomfortable thoughts and feelings in the service of what you value? In other words, if it's important to you to spend some time with friends, you might have thoughts like, oh, they're going to judge me, or I might feel nervous. It's been a while since I've done anything social. Are you willing to have that thought, have that little bit of anxiety, or maybe even a lot of bit of anxiety, and still just call up your friends or just go to that outside activity or whatever it might be, right? Instead of bargaining with the thoughts or fighting with the feelings, can you, like the bus, can you just kind of bring it with you and start taking those steps to do what's important to you? All right, so to wrap up, let's look at how do we use these 6, this is sort of your action challenge. So you have something specific to come out of this with. Here's very simple things. Again, don't make this overwhelming. This manifests in very small ways that really add up over a lifetime, and in terms of how important it can be to our mental health. So 6 steps that you can do each day for self-care. One is to reflect on your own values. Just kind of stay in touch. What is it that you value? And if you say you don't know, that might be a pretty important thing to take a look at. What am I living for? What's important to me? And what's my compass heading? It's so easy to get lost, all the different paths and journeys and things, but this compass reminds me of where my true north is, or whatever analogy you want to use there. The second one, take committed steps each day. So just as I said, what's some small thing? It doesn't have to be huge. It could be big, but what's some small thing you can do each day that moves you toward that thing that's important to you? Even something as simple as texting a friend or family member, hey, been thinking about you, hope you're doing okay. That can really brighten somebody's day, makes us feel good that we've done something to nurture something important to us. Remember that you're more than your job. Because again, it can be so easy to get lost in, so overwhelming, so caught up in the problems you're dealing with. And those are important again. But make sure you have more opportunities to just be, to be a friend, to spend time with people you care about, and etc. There's so much more to you than just what you're doing in any given moment. The fourth one is to notice your thoughts without getting lost in them. That's what I mentioned before. So being able to notice these thoughts without getting lost. So there's that movie playing again. And again, sometimes you have to problem solve, you have to think through things, but just being able to notice that instead of getting lost in your thoughts all day. The fifth one is give yourself permission to have feelings. And again, I'm not saying that you have to feel everything as soon as you feel it, or, again, we have to be professional, but just allow a little more opportunity at the end of the day. Just sort of open up a little bit, sit outside and look at the trees and just kind of allow some of these feelings to flow. The positive and the so-called negative, which are all just parts of us. And the last one, make contact with the present moment. Now, this is hard. It's so easy to automatically think, what's next? What's next? Or what did I do before? Every now and then, can you remember, just pause and say, what am I experiencing right now in this moment? All right. Well, in this moment, I'm feeling appreciation for being able to be here with you today. So, let's see, I think we only have a minute or two left. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or questions or comments before we wrap up.
If you have questions, go ahead and unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Very helpful information. Somebody X out that breakout room stuff. It's showing up.
Okay, I was going to say, I was hoping I wasn't supposed to go in a breakout room. So
Any questions, folks? Thank you, Rhonda. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Glory. Okay, good. I'm thinking, can you back up your PowerPoint a bit, Dr. Sears?
Yeah.
Couple slides back to some of the strategies, daily action steps. I like this because, and I want folks that are in the space that are looking for some ideas, not only for your personal wellness, but also for your worksite wellness programs.
And what's nice about all these 6 categories, as you can see, is they're very, very broad. So you may be doing some of this already. So it's just a nice framework to kind of make sure.
Don't tell Kathy to stop. Yes, reflect on your own values. Take committed steps each day. Things that we can do for ourselves and you can incorporate in your worksite wellness program. I'm sorry. Yes, you'll get the recorded link. Yes, screenshot that. Good idea. I'm sorry, Dr. Sears, did I cut you off?
Oh, no, not at all.
Any other questions? I'm checking the chat, talking to the room, and looking at this information at the same time. Thanks, Jim. Great information. Okay, we're going to get ready for a break. You have a 5-minute break. We have our next speaker coming up. Also, if you are in here and you want SCETCH, SCETCH stands for State Continuing Education Hours, okay? We are so thankful for the Michigan Education Association and Chad Williams. He is a SCETCH coordinator there. For those of you who attend this this conference, you'll get hours. We'll send that information over to Chad. What we'll do is we'll run a Zoom report, and it'll show the amount of time you are getting educated. We'll share it with Chad and his team, and they'll facilitate you getting the credits, and they'll reach out to you about that. So we're thankful for that relationship. If you are a member of Michigan Education Association, they are very much invested in not only you getting the education and support you need, but also your wellness and self-care. So definitely gain those credits if you like. Take your break. Go ahead. We'll be back at exactly 10:15. Thank you, Dr. Sears. That was wonderful as usual. We appreciate you coming, and definitely we will bring you back again.
Wonderful. Be happy to come back. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, everyone.